V.I.P. is a chilling masterpiece that outshines all other Korean crime thrillers to date. Its storyline, disturbing scenes, and psychological depth push boundaries like no other film in its genre. But despite its undeniable brilliance, the movie has faced multiple attempts to be taken down due to its shocking content. The movie follows a killer who travels across the country, committing horrific crimes in cold blood. Each time, he abducts a woman, brutally assaults her, and then decapitates her. And if that wasn't enough, he proceeds to slaughter her family in equally gruesome ways, leaving behind nothing but despair and horror. Yet, the most horrifying part is how this cold-blooded serial killer manages to stay free. Even after countless investigations, time and time again, he's caught, only to be released by the police within 48 hours without a trace of justice. So, what happens when a young girl, in the prime of her life, becomes his next victim? One day, as she walks down a quiet country road, fate takes a sinister turn. A car appears behind her. Before she can react, she's dragged into the vehicle. The next scene is nothing short of nightmarish. She's stripped bare, her body marked by brutal abuse, and she's placed on a table while a group of men continue to torment her. The horror doesn't stop there. Her brother is slaughtered, and even her 5-year-old sister is mercilessly killed in front of her. This is not just physical torture, it's a cruel psychological game meant to break the girl's spirit. However, sitting in a chair nearby is a sharply dressed man, and this man is none other than Gwang Il, the leader of the group of men across from him. As the girl's life slips away, Gwang Il steps forward, slipping on a raincoat as he approaches her. He takes a thin wire and, with cold precision, strangles her. Her struggle is futile, held down by the other men, and in the final moments, blood splatters across Gwang Il's face. Such brutal and inhumane acts of violence were soon discovered by the local North Korean police. When the police, led by Officer Dae-bum, arrived at the scene, what they found was nothing short of horrifying. The room looked like a battlefield. Bodies were scattered everywhere, from a 60-year-old elder to a 5-year-old child, all of them lifeless. Dae-bum, an experienced officer, immediately recognizes Gwang Il's handiwork, but when he reports the crime to his superiors, the response is chilling. He's told to let Gwang Il go. Dae-bum's protest is met with anger and even a threat to his career. His years of service and dedication to the country count for nothing. Forced to hand over his weapon and credentials, Dae-bum is left powerless, his hands tied by a system that protects monsters like Gwang Il. 3 years later, another naked female body was found in Seoul, South Korea. Her skin was completely torn apart, leaving nothing intact. Her entire body was marked by unimaginable torture. It was hard to fathom the horrors she endured before death. This was already the 8th body discovered in just a few months. Detective Lee-do, who arrived at the scene, barely glanced at the body. The brutal methods left no room for doubt. It was the work of the same unknown serial killer. Without a second thought, Lee-do and his team moved on. But these frequent killings sparked widespread panic, and the media quickly picked up the story, making every corner of Seoul feel unsafe. The pressure on the police skyrocketed, eventually driving the head of the homicide division to suicide. With his death, the burden shifted to the police chief, who wanted nothing to do with this complex case. He handed the entire investigation to Lee-do, granting him full authority to catch the killer as quickly as possible. Lee-do wasted no time and started investigating, but the killer left no trace. He always killed the victim's family as well, hindering progress on the case. While Lee-do and his team analyzed the situation, a breakthrough came when a police officer received a tip from the forensics department. Lee-do rushed to the lab, where the forensic team revealed that they'd found traces of foreign skin cells under the fingernails of the 7th victim, something that had been overlooked before. Lee-do immediately ordered his team to search the area for any matching suspects. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that powerful forces were protecting the killer. The reason? He was the son of a high-ranking government official in South Korea. The officials who had helped him rise to power would lose everything if their connection to the killer were exposed. In the ruthless world of South Korean politics, those in power are often tainted, with the lives and deaths of many buried beneath their feet. If the killer were caught or killed, the officials who supported him would fall into a bottomless abyss. With his usual air of supreme authority, Park Sung-won gave a cold order to the man standing before him. Jae-hyuk, make sure Gwang Il is never caught. If they arrest him, find a way to get him out. After leaving Park Sung-won's office, Jae-hyuk received a phone call from his men. They informed him that Gwang Il and his associates had been found by the police, and an urgent arrest was in progress. Jae-hyuk rushed to the scene, only to find that the police had completely surrounded the mansion. With his men in a standoff, under the protection of his team, Jae-hyuk approached Gwang Il, who was under guard, and tried to use the charge of violating national security laws to take him away before Lee-do could arrive. When the police heard the accusation, They were stunned. But just as Jae-hyuk thought his plan was about to succeed, a hand suddenly grabbed Gwang Il-'s arm. The person who arrived was none other than Lee-do. He immediately seized Gwang Il, taking him into his custody, and then showed Jae-hyuk his badge to assert his authority. Not fazed, Jae-hyuk presented his own credentials, insisting that Gwang Il was being arrested for violating national security laws, and that he was the one who should take him. But Lee-do wasn't so easily swayed. He declared that Gwang Il was the prime suspect in a series of brutal murders, and just as Jae-hyuk tried to claim priority, Lee-do blocked his way and pulled out an emergency arrest warrant, taunting him, "Do you have an arrest warrant?" Realizing he was losing, Jae-hyuk reluctantly watched as Lee-do took Gwang Il away. Afterward, Jae-hyuk ordered his men to find a lawyer for Gwang Il to delay the proceedings, while they continued searching for Gwang Il's associates. Meanwhile, Lee-do took Gwang Il into custody for questioning. The defense lawyer immediately presented an alibi, but Lee-do wasn't fooled. He quickly pressed the lawyer. Why was Gwang Il's DNA found inside the victims? Gwang Il, unfazed, responded with a bizarre explanation, claiming that he owned a farm where cucumbers and eggplants grew. The lawyer even presented a photo of the farm, suggesting that Gwang Il had been there all along, sharing produce with the neighbors. The absurdity of their defense left even Lee-do, a seasoned detective, speechless. Despite the ridiculousness of the claims, they had no solid evidence. Lee-do reluctantly left the interrogation room, but he wasn't worried. He knew Gwang Il had murdered countless people, and any alibi presented was likely a lie. Without wasting time, Lee-do instructed his team to check every security camera near Gwang Il's house. They were to gather footage from the neighborhood, traffic lights, and even nearby cars' dash cams. Nothing would be overlooked in the search for the truth. Upon hearing the news, Jae-hyuk's subordinates sprang into action. Moving swiftly and efficiently, they quickly sent stacks of files and videotapes for review. However, what Lee-do didn't know was that the police station's internal systems had already been infiltrated, and Jae-hyuk's team had gained access to everything. Every move Lee-do made was under their watch. While Lee-do was busy reviewing the files, Gwang Il's two men weren't so lucky. They had already been captured by a mysterious man, who treated them like animals. One was bloodied and beaten, while the other trembled on the floor. Helpless, the mysterious man struck his companion's head with a hammer, blow after blow. Once the man was dead, he stood over the trembling survivor, who fell to his knees, pleading for mercy. Meanwhile, Lee-do's team, working tirelessly day and night, finally found a clue. After reviewing footage from a dashcam, they spotted Gwang Il in the footage. They compared timestamps, and soon discovered more footage from other locations, showing Gwang Il's movements. Lee-do grinned as he saw the evidence. He immediately presented it to Gwang Il, mocking him for his so-called alibi. He showed him the footage, almost daring Gwang Il to explain himself. The defense lawyer, now cornered, could only reluctantly gather the evidence and remain silent. Meanwhile, Gwang Il's loyal follower, in fear of being caught, was quickly taken to a car and made a phone call to Jae-hyuk's men. Upon receiving the information, Jae-hyuk sent a car to intercept him. They found the man stumbling along an overpass and quickly dragged him into the car. Fearing police detection, in another room, Jae-hyuk confronted the police chief, and behind the glass, Park Sung-won and another man were sitting in conversation. Park Sung-won, using his power, was clearly attempting to pressure the police force. Jae-hyuk then informed the police chief of Gwang Il's identity, and the chief was visibly alarmed. It turned out that Gwang Il's father was one of the powerful figures in North Korea, and he had protection from country's CIA, which meant Gwang Il could not be allowed to fall. The police chief, realizing the gravity of the situation, reluctantly agreed. He admitted that Gwang Il's alibi had been proven false, but suggested they find Gwang Il's subordinates to serve as scapegoats. Only then could they release Gwang Il, appease country, and cover up the mess. The chief knew that if this went wrong, it would mean death for everyone involved. With the chief's backing, Jae-hyuk felt more confident and ordered his team to bring Gwang Il's henchman into custody as the scapegoat. He would be the one to take the fall, and it would appear as if Gwang Il was innocent. Jae-hyuk brought the man before Lee-do, who was caught completely off guard. When they arrived at the police chief's office, the order was clear: Gwang Il must be released. Lee-do was stunned by this sudden turn of events. The chief claimed they had already caught the real culprit, and Gwang Il's subordinate had confessed that he was the sole perpetrator. The chief even showed Lee-do documents proving that DNA from Gwang Il's henchman had been found on the victims, clearing Gwang Il of any wrongdoing. Lee-do, puzzled, asked why this information hadn't been discovered earlier. The DNA had only surfaced after the henchman was caught. The police chief, unwilling to discuss it further, told Lee-do to accept the situation. The real killer was in custody, and the case had to be closed. He insisted that Lee-do release Gwang Il immediately. Lee-do, though frustrated, didn't plan to let Gwang Il go so easily. He ordered his team to temporarily detain Gwang Il at the prosecutor's office, refusing to release him just yet. Then, he headed home, aware that the case was far from over. Upon returning home, Lee-do immediately sensed that something was off. He grabbed a baseball bat for protection, his instincts kicking in. As he entered the living room, he was shocked to find a man sitting on his couch. The man didn't make a move, so Lee-do stayed calm and began talking to him. After some conversation, Lee-do learned that there were just as many cases involving Gwang Il on their side, if not more. In fact, there were even 4 mass family murders. The man then pulled out a stack of photos and showed them to Lee-do. As Lee-do looked at the photos, he was shocked. The brutality depicted in the images was even more horrifying than the crimes they were investigating in South Korea. The man before him was none other than Dae-bum from North Korea. His 2 subordinates were victims of Gwang Il, and Dae-bum had been shot in the neck by him. After being dumped under a railway bridge by Gwang Il, Dae-bum was lucky to have survived. Dae-bum revealed that the men previously arrested by the police were also Gwang Il subordinates, but he had let them go. He had no interest in seeing Gwang Il arrested by the police. Instead, he wanted to personally take him down. He also revealed Gwang Il's true identity, which was why the South Korean government had been hesitant to act against him. Hearing all this and seeing the grisly images, Lee-do was filled with rage. Without hesitation, he slammed his foot on the gas and sped off toward the prosecutor's office. However, he didn't expect to run into Jae-hyuk and his team, who were attempting to take Gwang Il away. Seeing Gwang Il, Lee-do lost control and charged at him, delivering a furious beating. But the police officers present quickly intervened, pulling Lee-do off. On the ground, Gwang Il smirked arrogantly, saying, "Even if I'm a killer, what does it matter? The police will still have to let me go." This taunt sent Lee-do into a fit of rage, but his colleagues restrained him, keeping him from attacking further. In the end, he was forced to watch helplessly as Jae-hyuk and his men took Gwang Il away. The next day, Lee-do's actions were splashed across the newspapers, with reports detailing his violent outburst. Seizing the opportunity, the police chief suspended Lee-do from duty, ordering him to lay low for a while. Feeling utterly defeated, Lee-do returned home and drowned his frustrations in alcohol, contemplating the injustice and corruption he had encountered. At that moment, Lee-do's phone rang. It was Dae-bum on the line, requesting that Lee-do hand over Gwang Il to him. Lee-do replied that he had already been suspended and that he had already turned Gwang Il over. How could he possibly give him to Dae-bum now? Dae-bum wasn't flustered. Instead, he began telling Lee-do about an incident in Hong Kong, where Gwang Il had brutally assaulted a victim who just so happened to be Korean. The whole thing was caught on camera, and the victim was Korean, so the case was transferred to the South Korean police. Upon hearing this, Lee-do rushed to the evidence room and started searching. To his surprise, he found the case. Without wasting a second, he called the prosecutor's office and urgently requested an arrest warrant. Meanwhile, Gwang Il was being held by Jae-hyuk, locked in a room. As a Jae-hyuk subordinate passed by, Gwang Il's expression twisted into something sinister. When Jae-hyuk arrived, the woman's throat had already been slit by Gwang Il. She collapsed, barely breathing. Jae-hyuk hadn't anticipated Gwang Il's savagery, and was shocked by his total disregard for his own people. Gwang Il smirked at him, and Jae-hyuk, seething with rage, gave him a brutal beating, slamming Gwang Il's head to the floor. But Gwang Il remained unfazed, taunting Jae-hyuk by claiming that Jae-hyuk's group was only his bodyguard. If they dare to kill him, let's see how Jae-hyuk explains it to M Country. At the same time, CIA agent Paul from M Country also arrived to meet with Gwang Il. The reason the CIA was so intent on protecting him was simple. Gwang Il's father controlled an account containing a fortune so vast it could rival entire nations' wealth. But his father was untouchable, so the CIA had to deal with Gwang Il instead. They intended to use him to get access to that account. Just as Paul was about to take Gwang Il away, one of Jae-hyuk's subordinates received a phone call. He quickly informed Jae-hyuk that the police were arriving. Before he could finish, Lee-do and his team burst through the door, holding an arrest warrant in hand. They also played a video for everyone to see, exposing Gwang Il for the monster he truly was. The footage was shocking. Even Jae-hyuk was left speechless. Staring at the screen, Lee-do turned to him, challenging him, "Are you still going to protect this monster?" For the first time, Jae-hyuk was unusually silent. He lowered his head, not responding. Lee-do, in a moment of triumph, slapped handcuffs on Gwang Il, ordering his subordinates to take him away. But just as they were about to leave, Lee-do stopped Gwang Il. He said, "I've been thinking about this for a long time."
광일이 너 안 서지? 뒤지고 싶니? 이 새끼.
Now I finally understand why Gwang Il enjoys tormenting his victims so much. Clearly, Gwang Il had been pushed to the edge by Lee-do's words and was now lashing out in desperation. After humiliating Gwang Il, Lee-do immediately took him away. However, Paul couldn't let Lee-do do as he pleased and put pressure on Jae-hyuk. But Jae-hyuk, having just seen Gwang Il-'s crimes, was consumed with anger and wasn't about to help get Gwang Il out. Yet Lee-do found himself at a disadvantage. The chief had started pressuring him again, insisting that Gwang Il be released. He claimed the case was closed. The suspect had confessed. And why was Lee-do still pursuing it? As for the Hong Kong case, they weren't going to handle it anymore. So what good was it now that Lee-do was bringing it up? Lee-do, furious, smashed his phone, but when he saw Gwang Il in the car, he couldn't calm down. He demanded his subordinate's phone and called the prosecutor's office, intending to bring Gwang Il to the prosecution. However, when he called, they informed him that they had already received orders to stay out of this matter. Lee-do was stunned. It seemed everyone was avoiding anything related to Gwang Il. No one wanted to get involved. And now Lee-do didn't even know where he was driving. So he simply stopped in the middle of the road. At that moment, Jae-hyuk caught up and knocked on Lee-do's car window, asking if it was time to hand over Gwang Il. Lee-do, feeling helpless, knew he had no power anymore. Even the prosecutor didn't want to intervene. But Lee-do insisted that he had a gut feeling, if Gwang Il was released, he would continue committing crimes, and Lee-do would regret it. Jae-hyuk responded that he would hand Gwang Il over to Paul from M Country, and if he committed crimes, it wouldn't be in Seoul anymore. Just then, a bodyguard from M Country arrived, and they released Gwang Il from the car. However, when Gwang Il's handcuffs were unlocked, he launched an attack. Lee-do's blood splattered directly onto Jae-hyuk's face, instantly shocking him into a daze. Unexpectedly, Gwang Il shot and killed Lee-do. Gwang Il grinned and told Paul to take him away. Paul, furious, yelled at Gwang Il, asking why he couldn't just walk away. At this point, a furious Jae-hyuk snapped back into action and began chasing after Paul and the others to capture Gwang Il. The chase continued on the road, but just as Paul's car drove off, it was intercepted by Dae-bum, who smashed their vehicle with his own. When Gwang Il woke up, he saw Dae-bum approaching him. Panicked, he tried to escape, but Dae-bum dragged him out of the car window. Meanwhile, Jae-hyuk, holding a gun, kept a close eye on Dae-bum but didn't fire. Though Jae-hyuk seemed to want to kill Gwang Il more than Dae-bum, he knew he couldn't do it himself and had to leave it to Dae-bum. Dae-bum took Gwang Il onto a ship, intending to bring him back to North Korea. After Gwang Il was taken below deck, Dae-bum spread photos of the victims, preparing to avenge them. But Dae-bum didn't expect that as soon as he finished scattering the photos, Gwang Il, now dressed in a luxurious fur coat, appeared behind him, revealing that he had been betrayed by his men. With Dae-bum's death, Gwang Il would undoubtedly begin his killing spree again. 2 years later in Hong Kong, Gwang Il was once again caught by another group trying to extract information about his father's account. Jae-hyuk, hearing the news, rushed to the scene. After eliminating the men guarding Gwang Il thought Jae-hyuk had come to save him, but to his surprise, Jae-hyuk said nothing and shot him in the ankle, asking if it hurt. Still stunned, Gwang Il barely had time to react before Jae-hyuk shot his other leg and then hit his shoulder. Clearly, Jae-hyuk intended to torture Gwang Il to death. When the moment was right, Jae-hyuk shoved the gun into Gwang Il's mouth and, with Gwang Il's face filled with disbelief, ended his life. And that was the end of the story.